right, everyone, how are you doing? It's last talk of the day, so hopefully you're all still awake and listening. So I'm going to talk to you about doing the most good. But I realize that the theme of this conference is all about like the future and everything. So really, it's going to be about the past, present, and future of doing the most good in technology. The past being my personal past, the present being some things I'm seeing happening right now, and my ideas for how we can attempt to do good in the future. So hello, like I said, my name is Mina Markham. You can reach me mostly on Twitter at my handle there. My website is out of date. You can look at it if you want to, but probably don't. I am currently a senior engineer at Slack, as Phil said, but before that, I worked for Hillary Clinton trying to get her elected as the next president of the United States. Spoiler alert, didn't really work. With that disclaimer, it is not my fault. I tried, y'all. So we had this conference over the last 2 days. We've talked about a lot of different cool technology. This is just some of the things some of the topics that all the speakers here have spoke about. But the thing is, I'm actually not going to talk to you about any specific tech at all. Instead, I am going to talk to you about good, doing good, and what I think it means to do good. With a little disclaimer, I am not going to claim that I have any answers. I'm not even really going to give you actual advice. It's more just my opinions about what I've noticed in the world the past couple of years. With that in mind, I realize some of the things I'm going to talk about will probably make some of you extremely uncomfortable, and for that, I am sorry. We'll get through it together. It'll be okay. So my journey into doing good started back in, I guess, January of 2015. This is me when I was packing up my apartment at the time in Dallas, Texas, and I was moving to this great new job that I got. I was really, really excited about. I was moving to Austin to go work at IBM Design with Jessica, who was wooing at me. And I was really excited to take this job, and it was, like, at the time, the best job I ever had, and it was going to be able to use all of the skills that I've been working so hard at, and I was going to be able to make, like, pattern libraries and design systems. It was going to be really, really cool. But basically, I was kind of feeling myself at that time. It was good. And then March of 2015, about 2.5 months into this really great job that I dropped my life for and picked up everything and moved to Austin for, I get this email. This email from a mysterious person I've never talked to before saying they got my name from a mutual acquaintance, and they wanted me to work for a social good issue that would have the opportunity to affect millions upon millions of Americans. And knowing now what I know what that job offer actually was, can we appreciate how vague this email is? Like, social good issue for millions of people, that's really how you're going to describe you want me to join a presidential campaign? Long story short, I said yes. So 6 months into this great job that I just got, I quit, basically blew up my life in Austin. I had to, for various reasons, I had to break contracts, I had to break my lease, had to sell my car. I actually went into debt to take this job. So I really, truly believe that this was going to be a really good thing, not just for me, but for the country. So in June of 2015, I joined the tech team, which looked like this when I arrived. I was actually the first engineer that was hired, so that was kind of cool. But by the time I ended up picking up my life and blew it up and moving to Brooklyn, this is what the team looked like. And towards the end, this is on election day, what the team looked like then, we grew exponentially. At the end, we had about 80 people on the tech team that included engineers, product designers, and product managers. And I learned a lot during my time on the campaign, both technically and just culturally and socially. And after it was over, a lot of people started coming to me with a very similar question. There were many people in the US and across the world were a little distraught at the results, and because they knew that I was I was right there in the midst of it, they wanted to know how I was feeling, what I was thinking, how we could move forward, what the next steps were. And they were asking me, Mina, how do I attempt to do good in the world right now? How do I attempt to use my skills? How do I attempt to use tech for good? And it took me a long time to come up with an answer that felt right, that felt true. And the answer I came up with was actually pretty uncomfortable and pretty depressing, at least for me, until I wrapped my head around it. The answer is tech is not good. Tech as an industry, as a entity, is not necessarily a huge. It can be a huge driving force for good, but it's not always a huge driving force for good. We tend to automate people out of jobs. We destroy communities with gentrification, and we remove affordable housing. We classify Black people as gorillas with our algorithms, and then instead of fixing the problem, we just remove the search term entirely. We practice algorithmic cruelty by showing a grieving father images of his dead child, not just once, but twice, years later. We kind of don't learn from our mistakes. And as the talk earlier about ethical design, if you're not thinking about how what you're building can be used to cause someone harm, you're really not doing all of your job. Now, I know people might think that I am picking on Google and Facebook, and yeah, I kind of am, because they're easy targets, but they also have a big social responsibility to understand their impact over their intention, as was spoken to earlier. Now, I know that the intention of these technologies is not to cause harm, it's not to hurt people, it's not to put more bad things in the world, but unfortunately, sometimes that is the impact that it has. So for example, right after the election in America in 2016, a lot of people were pointing fingers at Facebook saying that they didn't take fake news and uncredible sources as seriously as they should have, and that's how a lot of misinformation about the candidates and about the election got spread. And Mark Zuckerberg responded by saying he thinks it was a crazy idea, that it was his fault or his company's fault at all. Similarly, Jimmy Fallon, a talk show host in America, he had Donald Trump on his show before the election cycle, and it was basically a kind of a joke segment. He made a joke out of this man who was spewing all of this hateful and hurtful rhetoric, and he got a lot of flack for it. And his response was, I didn't do it to humanize him. I didn't do it to minimize, I almost did it to minimize him. He was trying to say that, look at this man, he is a joke, but that's not the way it came across. That was not the impact of his actions. The impact was people were laughing and thinking that, oh, clearly this guy is just joking and it's not that big of a deal. And I think that we as technologists, we are very good at trying to solve problems, but I think we first need to take a step back and truly understand what the real problems are. And sometimes that means understanding your part in the problem. Eventually, Mark Zuckerberg came around after dismissing the idea that Facebook was at fault and said that it was dismissive and basically he was being dismissive and saying that it wasn't anything to do with Facebook. And I do applaud and commend him for actually coming around and saying, you know what, I was wrong, I shouldn't have said that. Because I feel like too many times people don't truly own up to their actions. There's still some work to be done, but at least he acknowledged that, okay, maybe that was something I shouldn't have said. Because I'm not in America, I feel more comfortable with this next slide, but I also think that how do I put this? I'm just gonna show it. Okay, so there's this idea that there's liberal bubbles that exist both in America and outside of America, and a lot of people who were on my side, so to speak, were allies, particularly white women, were very distraught and saying, it's not our fault, I don't know what to do. And honestly, 53% of white women in America voted for Donald Trump. So I don't necessarily know what that means, but to me that says that maybe you all should talk to your families and see what is going on over there. So here's a tweet that I sent out, I think it was last year, probably last year in the summer. It was right around the time that the Google memo was sent out with that guy saying horribly misogynist things. And soon after that, in South Carolina, in Charleston, I believe it was, there was this rally that had a bunch of, I guess, the far-right people with tiki torches burning things in Charleston, having a rally and a march. And it was very eerily reminiscent of the 1960s and the Ku Klux Klan for me. And it gave me really, really, it made me very, very uncomfortable and very, I feared for my safety, even though I wasn't there. It still made me feel very unsafe in my country. And so I tweeted this out saying that all the people who were doing these things were perpetuated by white men. So I was saying that white men have told me this week that I don't belong in tech because I'm a woman, and I don't belong anywhere because I'm black. And it made me very, very distraught and depressed, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And I put it out there because I tend to tweet my feelings, because why not? And I got back a great deal of responses, one being from my CEO telling me that he personally thinks that I do belong in tech and I belong anywhere I want to be, which was very helpful to hear and read at the time that I needed it. But I also got a nice flood of other information, which was great and validating and what I needed to hear at the time. But I also got a bunch of these. People who took issue with me generalizing white men into this group of people that they didn't really want to, group of behaviors that they didn't want to identify with. And some people in the room might be feeling the same way, like, it's not all of us, it's not all white people, it's not all white men. I've heard it and I understand, but please know that if the statement doesn't sound like you, I'm probably not talking to you. But this is typical behavior of someone who considers themselves to be an ally. If they see that someone is saying something about an identity something that they identify with, their immediate response is to be like, wait, I'm not me, I don't do that, I'm one of the good ones. And to that I say, maybe we don't need more allies in that sense. Like, if that's typical ally behavior, then maybe you shouldn't be an ally. Instead, you should be an accomplice. What's an accomplice? Well, my friend Doretti, who works with me in Slack, she introduced me to this term where allies tends to be a little bit more performative. It's a lot of people saying things in support of another group. There's not a whole lot of action or personal sacrifice associated with those terms. It's more people just saying, yes, I support you, but they don't actually take any further steps. Whereas an accomplice is a person who uses their position of privilege to support marginalized people at a personal risk. Or to put it in a more colloquialism term, accomplices have skin in the game. Basically, they don't talk about it, they are about it, they do things. And I'm going to illustrate a couple of examples as to what accomplices might look like. So this is the Confederate battle flag from the Civil War in the US back in the 1800s. And it still is seen across the southern United States today. People who use it see it as a symbol of Southern heritage. People like me who are offended by it see it as a symbol of the hope of preservation of slavery. It's a very offensive, very controversial symbol in the US. And it flies on a lot of official government buildings in the South. Back in, I believe this was 2016, maybe 2015, I can't remember the exact year, but Bree Newsom, the woman here, there you go, Bree Newsom there, she actually scaled the flagpole down in South Carolina to remove the flag from the Capitol building as a matter of protest. And she got a lot of flack for it, she got arrested for it, she got a lot of attention for it. But she also had an actual literal accomplice helping her do this. And a lot of people don't know who he was or what his role was. His name was James, and he was the one who actually harnessed her up and hoisted her up the flagpole. And when she was eventually arrested, he was arrested right along with her. And the thing that I really love about this photo is, is that look at him. He's not worried. He's not concerned in the slightest about what's happening to him. He is worried about her and making sure that she is being treated with dignity and respect while they are both being arrested for their civil disobedience. That is one example of what an accomplice might look like. Secondly, how many of you have ever seen this photo? Great, cool. So it's from the 1968 Olympics. This is for the 200-meter dash. The gold and bronze winners were two black men from America, and the silver winner was a man named Peter Norman, who was from Australia. Basically, I'm going to make the story pretty brief, but they did a protest of the way that African Americans were being treated in the US at that time. It was right in the midst of the civil rights movement. There was a lot of civil unrest. There was a lot of anger and oppression being felt. And so they decided to use that moment of them getting their Olympic prize or Olympic medal on this international stage to state a silent protest by raising a fist during the US national anthem. You can see that Peter is not doing so. He's not doing so purposely, and I'll tell you why in a second. But he also, the gloves that they're wearing, it was his idea to give one glove to each person so that they both had a glove, which is why one of them is raising the opposite fist of each other. But anyway, after the protest was over, they were all booed off the podium, and the two black gentlemen, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, were given lots of scrutiny and lots of criticism back in the US. Meanwhile, Peter was also ostracized back in his own country of Australia. This demonstration is regarded as one of the most overt political statements of the modern Olympic era. But Peter, he was not just a passive bystander in all of this. He actually was purposely diminishing his appearance there because he wanted people to focus on the two other men on the podium. Even though he didn't actually take part in the protest, so to speak, he didn't raise his fist or anything, he was completely shut out from Australian Olympics from there on out. He was not allowed to compete ever again, even though he qualified 13 times over in 1972. They would not let him compete in the Olympics. He wasn't even welcome at the Olympics until 2000 in the Summer Olympics. There's this statue, I don't remember where it is, but there's a statue of that moment somewhere in the US, and as you can see, the podium where Peter should be standing is empty. And it's empty on purpose because he wanted people to be able to take their photo with that monumentous moment. He wanted that podium to be free for people to take their own, I guess it's before selfies became a thing, but he wanted people to be able to stand there and picture themselves in that moment. So he purposely stepped out of the way of history. John Carlos basically said it best, where it's like if he and Tommy Smith were getting beat up in America, Peter was facing the entire country of Australia and facing it alone. When he died in 2006, they both flew to Australia to be pallbearers in his funeral. But it wasn't until 2012 that the Australian government even apologized for how Peter was treated. 6 years after his death, he finally got the apology that he deserved. And even after all of that, he said in 2000 that he would do it all over again, that, yeah, he won a silver medal, but he ended up being running the fastest race of his life and being a part of something that transcended the Olympic Games. So, I'm not saying that you have to get arrested or die destitute to be a true accomplice, or if you want to use the term ally, fine. But I am saying that you need to have some kind of personal stake in the situation. That could be as little as using your social capital. Lots of people have more social capital than they realize. When I mentioned that tweet that I did earlier about how I was getting flooded with a bunch of white men telling me that they didn't want to be included, I didn't have to deal with the responses because true accomplices, people who don't know me, came in and did that part for me. They were saying that people were taking something personally that shouldn't be taken personally. Like, again, as I said, if a statement doesn't sound like something you were doing, then I'm probably not talking about you. I really appreciated people like this coming in and saying the things that I did not have the emotional capacity to say at the time because it was very, very draining. Here's one of my personal friends and real true accomplice essentially saying something very similar. You'll have to forgive Zach, he's a little bit of a foul mouth, but he essentially was saying that he doesn't understand why white people and white men in particular, feel threatened when advocating for people of color and unrepresented groups. And essentially, he was saying he's putting his own reputation, own social capital on the line by saying these things in a very public forum that, again, might ostracize and make his peers pretty uncomfortable. But he does bring up a good point in another way to be a true accomplice, and that is to advocate for others. I'll give you a more, I guess, relatable example. Octavia Spencer and Jessica Chastain have starred together in a couple of movies, and they recently, Jessica here and Octavia, Jessica decided, she found out that Octavia was being underpaid for what an actress should be paid of her caliber. And so what she did was, she decided to, in their next movie deal, negotiate and tie the two deals together, saying, if you pay me this, you have to pay Octavia this. And by doing so, she ended up being able to have Octavia's salary, her rate, raised 5 times to what it normally was, basically just by standing with her and negotiating together as opposed to just going in for herself. Octavia here is saying that she doesn't know if doing so cost Jessica any money, like she doesn't know if that made her rate lower or not, but the fact that she did that meant that her own personal rate got higher, and it helped increase a little bit of pay equity in the Hollywood industry. I love the fact that Jessica said that she was getting underpaid for so long, and it was just such a very easy thing for her to use her position, to use her privilege to make sure that her friend was getting taken care of as well. So here's this chart. This is actually a very America-centric chart, but basically what it's saying is that for every dollar that a white man makes in the tech industry, me, a black woman, I'm all the way here at the bottom. I'm actually paid 21 cents of every dollar that a white male peer might be made. And that, to me, is very frustrating. So I'm going to go ahead and give you all, and anyone who might watch this later, if you take nothing else away from this talk, I'm going to ask you to tell your female coworkers what you're being paid. I know employers hate this advice, and I don't really care. I think that if we all understand what each other is like, if we all understand, have a better idea of like the range of salaries that exist in the tech industry, we'll be that much closer to closing the pay gap and to pay equity and to pay transparency. Again, my friend Zach, love him with his foul mouth. He basically was saying that anyone who's threatened by the idea of pay transparency or increasing or decreasing the pay gap basically needs to grow up or get out of the way. He says it a little more dirtily, but that's the gist of what he was saying. Okay, so getting back to other ways that you can do good, I'm going to talk to you about, let's go back to the past for a bit and talk to you about my time on the campaign. There was one thing that I learned during my time on the campaign that took me by surprise, and that was this need to do the unglamorous work. So currently, I work at Slack. It's a beautiful building in San Francisco. Isn't it so lovely? Look at that. I love it. The office is great. We moved in this office a couple of months ago, and it's really, truly a beautiful place to work. Like, I really, really love it there. You can almost say that these are nice glamorous shots, so to speak. Working on a presidential campaign, even working for one with Hillary Clinton, was distinctly unglamorous. This is pretty much what the office looked like when I got there. We tried to make it homey and fix it up. My favorite feature of the office, of course, is Winnie, right there, our office dog. But it was not a very, I guess the word I'm using for glamorous, it wasn't a very a posh environment to be in. This is probably one of my favorite photos. This room existed in one of our field offices in Iowa, and it just was a blank, empty room with something called the data room written on the wall with a sad, lonely little chair in the corner. And that's where our data analyst had to sit and do his work while he was there. Like, he didn't even get a desk. He got a corner in the room. It's like, just go over there and, do your numbers and come back and tell us some stuff. Like, it was not a hugely, it's not the experience that you're used to when you come from a startup or Silicon Valley. Even this photo, I love this photo. This is Stephanie Hannon, our CTO, the first female CTO of a presidential campaign, and she is packing boxes. She is packing thousands and thousands of boxes full of paper for, do you know what canvassing is, by any chance? Canvassing is when a volunteer goes door to door to knock on doors in a particular location and ask who this person is intending to vote for. Well, maybe not ask, I'm not sure they can ask that question, but it's basically advocating for your particular candidate and saying, please go vote, and when you do, I hope you vote for this person. So she's making hundreds of paper packets. We were a tech team, we were engineers, and she's collating thousands of papers to go hand out to people. And then she's making phone calls. We actually all made phone calls. We all called people all over the country to encourage them to go vote and encouraging them to go vote for Hillary. We canvassed through the snow. Not me, because I'm a wimp, but other people canvassed through the blizzardy snow up in Vermont and New Hampshire. We made lots and lots of physical signs to go out at the debate days and make sure there was a nice presence and showing our support for our candidate. And I remember when I was asked to do each and every one of these things, I got really indignant. I was like, you know what, damn it, I'm an engineer. I didn't sign up for this. I came here to write code, to make some websites, to build some apps, and I didn't want to go call people. I don't want to talk to people. What's wrong with all of you? I didn't realize that was exactly the job I signed up for. I just didn't realize it yet. That was a very big part of what I was expected to do, and in some ways, it was definitely more impactful than any code I could have written. So in doing so, and going through that process and learning how the work and how the word really gets out, I really just had to humble myself for a second and be like, you know what, it's not really all about me. It's not even really all about tech. It's about the mission and getting the mission done by however means you need to. And sometimes that means getting away from the computer and going out and knocking on some doors. So I told you how I got a fancy new job at IBM and promptly quit it 6 months later and went into debt to do all of this thing. And then at the end, we didn't even accomplish our goal. She didn't win. And coloring politically here for a second, the world went to shit. So people then ask me, was it worth it? Was all of that worth it? Was you sacrificing all of that, given the results, was it worth it? And I've told this particular part of the story a few times, so let me see if I can get through it. But it was, working in a campaign takes a lot out of you. It takes a lot out of you physically, mentally, emotionally. It's just, you're kind of a wreck. You kind of give all of yourself to it. I was there from almost the beginning, so about 15 months, 18 months. It's kind of a blur. But I was there for a very, very long time. And, excuse me. During that time, I remember a lot of things. Like I said before, I remember Winnie. Winnie, our unofficial campaign office dog / mascot / therapy dog. She was there a lot. She became slightly famous in her own right. This photo was from an article that was about her. I just happened to be in the photo. I remember a lot of booze, like a lot of drinking. This particular photo was taken after our Supreme Court passed marriage equality. So we were celebrating the fact that everyone could get married in any state, and it was a great thing. I remember a lot of food, like a lot of free food, which was great because I usually forgot to eat. So having even snacks around was great. I remember just like a lot of food actually, like a lot of pizza. a lot of chicken. I started making cakes because I needed something else to do with my hands, so I made an American flag cake. I made a cake that was full of candy corn for Halloween. I even made a fried chicken cake. Um, the fried chicken cake, I have not made it since, but it is, when I say cake, I mean it's cornbread with mashed potatoes covering it and gravy with some fried chicken on top. I made it for a coworker. He was getting married, and he loves fried chicken, so I did that, and it was great. But I remember meeting former presidents. Here I am with a few people of the team with former President Bill Clinton. I remember seeing the domain name of the site that I helped build on the side of a plane. That is cool. To see the URL for your project flying around, that was really cool. And I remember the coolest thing I'll probably ever do. I remember demoing HillaryClinton.com to Hillary Clinton herself. And at this point, people generally ask me what she's like. She is kind, considerate, incredibly smart, slightly intimidating, but that has nothing to do with her. It's more because she comes with people. And the one thing I do remember her saying to me was that she looked at me and she's like, I don't really understand a lot of what you do, but thank you so much for doing it. And I remember when the election was over, seeing I walked out of the building, out of our campaign headquarters, and I saw all these messages on the sidewalk of kids. There were little girls, little boys on the sidewalk writing things in chalk, saying thank you and keep fighting, and all these really wonderfully encouraging things that made me feel a lot better. And I remember the people of New York putting up all these Post-it notes in the subways, essentially saying the same thing. Thank you, the fight goes on, resistance, all of that. And I remember the last time I saw Hillary Clinton herself. It was 3 days after the election, which was probably the worst day of all of our lives. And she spent her entire time thanking us, her staff, and telling us to go take care of ourselves, do what we had to do, and then come back and keep fighting. That night, she gave us all a rose and later a thank you letter, both of which are framed on my desk back home. But more importantly, I remember a lot of joy, just a lot of fun and excitement and this bristling energy of trying to make the world a better place. The feeling I think of every time I think back on this is just really just true joy. And that brings me to one of my last statements, which was you need to find joy where you can. Sometimes when you attempt to do good, things don't work out the way you planned, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't a worthwhile effort. So finding the joy in any particular pursuit is important to keep your spirits up. So one of the things that brought me joy was I created the pattern library called Pantsuit for her, and a lot of people really loved it. That's probably why most of you have heard of me and why I'm on the stage right now is because people heard of this thing and really took a shine to it. And that made me feel so good at the time, and still fills me with a lot of pride. I got messages, indirect messages, from Hillary saying that she really enjoyed the website and how much she enjoyed the work we were doing, which again, made me feel a lot better. Sometimes I would get it indirectly from news organizations. She said that she loved this college calculator thing that we built for her. I built that, and she loved it, and she sees it, and it was really cool. Also, she did this thing, she loved our website so much, she actually put it on a projector in her rallies. Do you see that back there? That is a weird thing to do, right? You can't interact with a projection, but the fact that she loved it so much, she was like, you should put the website up on a projection so people can see it. I'm like, that, you know what, that just, I'm gonna be okay, I'm gonna be okay. One of the things I did for myself after the election was over was, to be fair, I fled the country. I went to Hong Kong for a while, and that brought me a lot of joy and a lot of comfort when I needed it. And some people might say that I was being self-indulgent, I was running from my problems, running from my feelings, but it brought me joy. And to that I say, joy is not indulgent, it's not self-indulgent. Joy is defiant. If in the face of adversity you can find a moment of joy, then that's worth something, that's not nothing. Okay, so this whole conference is about the future. So what does the future of doing good in tech look like? Well, I told you I wasn't going to talk about any actual technologies, and I'm not. What I think the future of tech looks like is standing in solidarity with those who have less and do less and aren't able to achieve as much as you through no fault of their own. It looks like the Google walkout that happened with a bunch of Google workers, male and female, walking out in protest of the sexual harassment that claims and payouts that have been happening. It looks like people who weren't necessarily directly affected standing in solidarity with those who were affected. It looks like running a good business. And what I mean by that is if you're in a position of running an organization, like a CEO or entrepreneur or whatever, it looks like doing the right thing whenever you can. It looks like Fog Creek. Yes, I said that right, Fog Creek. They have pay transparency. Everyone in the company knows what everyone else is making, which means that it's less likely to have any pay disparities and a pay gap because everything is out in the open for everyone to see. It looks like Salesforce going ahead and forking over the money to correct the pay inequities that they had amongst their female employees. And it looks like my company, Slack, doing a highly experimental program where they are offering to train and potentially hire formerly incarcerated people into tech after they've had apprenticeships and learned how to become an engineer. This is a group of people who it's very hard for them to find work in the US because they used to be incarcerated. So the idea that they can get a job, and not just any job, but a job in tech with the kind of salaries that we make can be life-altering for them. So this is a great example of how to use your position for social good if you have the ability to do so. So I've talked to you a lot about things that have happened in my past, things that are currently happening, and ways that I see for us to do good in the future. And when I say do good, I don't just mean do good wherever you can. I mean doing the most good. And what that looks like is, doing all the good that you can for all the people that you can in all the ways that you can for as long as you can. And with that, I say thank you.